Red finger. This is a story from when I was in elementary school. I had a friend named Saki, who was energetic, curious, and a bit mischievous. She was a little mischievous, and I was rather reticent and reserved. To be honest, we had such opposite personalities that I don't know how we became friends. Perhaps it was because we both had something that we lacked that we were somehow attracted to each other. Anyway, Saki and I were always playing together. She would suggest, "Let's do this today," and I would go along with her. I enjoyed doing just that, so I never invited Saki to play with me or gave her my opinion on anything. Even if I ended up doing something a little bad or dangerous in my play with her, I understood that it was not good, but I continued to do it with her, saying, "Well, it's fun, so it's okay." The next day Saki got involved, and our parents and homeroom teacher both got angry at us. We spent our days like that. It was one day in the 3rd grade of elementary school. I think it was just after the summer vacation. That day, Saki said, "Let's go to the woods behind the school after school today." She wasn't planning to do anything there, but to go there anyway. The teachers and adults around her had told her not to go there alone. It was not that there was any sinister reason or that many people had died there, but simply because it was uninhabited, dense, and dangerous. Saki, on the other hand, didn't care about such things and invited me to join her without any hesitation. Saki and I crept along the path leading to the woods in the late afternoon and began our search with great enthusiasm. To be honest, the woods themselves were not as dangerous as I had heard. Yes, it was a little rough and the footing was a little bad, but for a child from the countryside who is used to nature, it was not a problem. I remember Saki and I laughing as we walked through the forest, saying, "Oh, it's no big deal at all." We didn't encounter any snakes or bees or other dangerous creatures, much less hear strange voices or be chased by strange things. I was just pleasantly surprised by the evening sun shining through the trees, the smell of greenery brought by the gentle breeze, and the sound of a brown-headed cowbird coming from a little distance away. I still regret that I should have met some danger here and turned back early. After about 20 minutes of walking, we suddenly found ourselves in an open area. Suddenly, we came to an open area. The ground, which until then had been overgrown with vegetation and covered with fallen branches and pebbles, was unnaturally flat and bare of vegetation, and spread out in a circle with a radius of about 5 meters. A small grave had been erected right in the center of the circle. It was probably an unmarked grave. In the countryside and nearby mountains and fields, there are often private cemeteries called deemed cemeteries, and this in itself is not unusual. However, the graves were strange in many ways. There was an oval-shaped pole stone placed on a handmade platform made from a combination of 2 irregularly shaped stones, and 2 bamboo tubes, probably in place of a flower stand, or placed next to it. There were higanbana, cluster amaryllis, flowers there. They looked as if they had just been arranged. They were fresh and bright red. Only one of the 2 bamboo tubes, on one side. Yes, there are people who go into the mountains to take care of unmarked graves. But for all that, the gravestone itself was completely mossy and in such disrepair that it seemed as if no one had visited it for years. Only the flowers were unnaturally beautiful. If you are going to offer flowers, you would at least clean and care for the gravestone before doing so. And if you know the Buddhist way well enough to take such care of your gravesite, you would know that it is not a good idea to offer poisonous higanbana as Buddhist flowers. However, there was no way that Saki and I had such knowledge at that time, and although it was a little unusual or strange, we approached the gravestone without any kind of caution. I was just looking at it from nearby, but Saki was saying, "Whose grave is this?" And she was peeling off the moss on the gravestone with her fingernails, even though she should have stopped. She was also looking at a single higanbana, cluster amaryllis, in her hand as if she was licking it. I had a bad feeling about this. I did not sense any kind of presence like a psychic, nor did I understand the strangeness of that grave as much as I do now. Still, the bright red cluster amidst the dimly lit green and brown space seemed strange to my eyes. The setting sun was just hitting the grave where we were. The orange glow on the red petals made the cluster amaryllis glisten with a color that was even more vivid, like burnt iron. It was a beautiful color. But I don't think it was the kind of beauty that makes you fall in love with it. It was a beauty that made the viewer somewhat uneasy. In the end, the gravestone was so weathered that we could not read the name that would have been inscribed on it. There was nothing else of interest, so Saki and I became bored and turned around and trudged back to our own homes. I was anxious all the way home. I couldn't get that glistening cluster amaryllis out of my mind. And the look in Saki's eyes as she gazed at them was somehow different from usual. Her eyes were as beautiful and full of curiosity as usual, but something was different about them. In hindsight, she was probably already crazy. The next day, Saki and I came to school without any problems. However, Saki told me that the fingers on her left hand hurt. When I looked at it, I found that it was indeed a little red around the fingertip. I thought that she had been bitten by some bad insect or had a rash from some plant when we were walking in the woods yesterday. She was touching a lot of things. The next day, Saki was still saying, "It hurts," as if she had not told her parents or applied medicine. When I looked at it, it seemed more red and swollen than yesterday, so I told her that she should go to the hospital as soon as possible, and that day was over. The next morning, Saki did not come. I wondered if something had happened, but her homeroom teacher told me that she was going to the hospital and would be absent today. I was relieved, but also a little worried. I heard that she had to go to the hospital and could not come to school. It was so bad that she had to stay home all day. When Saki and I went deep into the woods that day, the same bad premonition I had felt came back to haunt me. I desperately hoped that I was mistaken. But it turned out to be true. That evening, Saki went missing. Saki, who was supposed to be home all the time, had been missing from the house for some time, and her parents reported to the police that they could not find her even after searching the area. The school was also notified. Since this is a small country town, the news spread quickly throughout the area and a big commotion broke out. Various people went around asking people if they had seen Saki. I was thinking about the woods and the cluster amaryllis on the grave, but of course I had not heard that she was going alone again, and I had no faith in such things as ghosts and curses, even though I felt a bad atmosphere, so I half-heartedly shook it off, saying, "There is no way it has anything to do with that." I was so convinced that there was no way it could have anything to do with it. In the end, Saki's whereabouts were unknown, and the police and residents searched all night without finding her. The search was carried over to the next day, and it was even decided that the police would patrol the area and send the children off to school in groups until they were found. The result: Saki returned at dusk the day after she disappeared. She returned with her left arm missing from the elbow onward. She was found near the entrance to that wooded area behind the school. A policeman on patrol took her into custody when she came out of the woods and was walking aimlessly. Saki's parents were immediately notified, and several of her classmates and adults, including myself, went to pick her up. We were all absolutely stunned. There are many strange points. To begin with, the forest was the first place we searched for Saki, thinking that she was mischievous and might have wandered into a place where she was not supposed to go. However, even though several people searched everywhere on the day she disappeared, Saki could not be found. Even when the police searched the area again after she was found, they could find no footprints or other traces of her at all. The fact that no other injuries or stains on her clothes were found, despite the fact that she had probably been wandering around for almost a whole day. But what was strangest and creepiest of all? Saki had not shed a drop of blood. The cut on her missing left arm was neatly covered with skin, as if it had never been there in the first place, and Saki herself did not seem to be in any pain at all. When Saki was found, her memory was gone and she could not remember what had happened to her, and no matter what anyone asked her, she simply said, "I don't know or I don't remember." She was somewhat absent-minded and seemed to be out of her mind at the time. Her eyes were not looking at anything. After that, all hell broke loose again. The teacher informed us that Saki could not come to school for a while. After that, Saki never came back. About a week after she was found, the teacher suddenly informed us that Saki had transferred to another school. Everyone thought it was probably a lie, but no one said anything because the atmosphere was such that it was not even allowed to talk about it anymore. As elementary school students in a rural town with no means of communication, we had no way of finding out what had happened to her. The teachers at school would not tell us anything. Her parents and the adults around her said they did not know if they were lying or not, and the place where Saki's house used to be was already empty and deserted. Even now, we still don't know. We still don't know where she is or if she is even alive. Only, later, on the day Saki missed school to go to the hospital, I was able to talk to the doctor at the private clinic who examined her. It is a small town, almost like a village. It is a small town, almost like a village, so we didn't have to go out of our way to find a doctor's office. The doctor did not know about Saki's whereabouts either, but he did tell me about that left arm. All we learned as a result was a more puzzling and uncanny fact. According to him, Saki was brought to the hospital that day by her parents, crying and screaming. She said, "My left arm hurts, and the fingers of my left hand hurt." He had tried all kinds of hands, but there was no sign that it would ever go away. When he was at a loss for what to do, the pain suddenly subsided, and Saki stopped crying as if nothing had happened. In the end, we had no clue as to the cause or anything else, so we sent her home, telling her to wait for a call from a more specialized and larger hospital, and nailing her to never go outside and keep her at rest for the rest of the day. What happened to Saki's left hand at that time? I found myself asking him that. Then he silently handed me a picture. He told me that he had taken it when he examined Saki. "I'm not really supposed to show you these things," he said. He said, "Even if I told you, you would never believe me." I was horrified to see it. I couldn't believe it was a human hand. When I saw it at school, the finger was a little red, but it had turned a painful red color, as if it had been badly burned, and was unusually swollen. The area from the base of the finger to the wrist and from there to the elbow had turned a greenish color, as if it had become necrotic due to lack of blood supply. Saki's arms, which were thin to begin with, had lost even more flesh and become thinner and thinner, and the texture of her skin was so thin that it was hard to believe that it was human skin. Then I realized. It was a bud. They were buds of higanbana. The higanbana has multiple flower stalks growing on a single stem, which produce long, thin, red buds. The buds resemble a human hand with slightly spread fingers. The buds split open from the tips and open in a shape that looks as if they are rolled up. Saki's left hand in the picture was exactly like a higanbana bud. As soon as I saw it, the memories of what I saw that day flashed through my mind like a running lantern. In the woods. The setting sun shining through the trees. The smell of greenery and the call of the brown-eared bulbul. A strangely open place. A grave standing in the middle of it. A moss-covered stone pole and stand. Lush higanbana flowers that looked like they had just been offered. The bright cluster amaryllis that looked like burnt iron. The bamboo tube that served as a flower stand was empty on one side. I was just so scared. I left the hospital in tears. Since then, I have been asking people around me about the forest in a roundabout way. I was looking for any clues as to what had happened to Saki. It could have been a rumor, an old story, anything. I wanted something. Even if it was something scary, I wanted something I could be satisfied with. But there was nothing. To begin with, there was no mention of even a grave in the back. I thought the adults were just stubbornly keeping their mouths shut, so when I was older, I did some research on my own. Still, I found nothing. As far as the people's testimonies and the records I found indicated, that forest was just a forest that had been left alone, by people. I don't know what happened to Saki. We don't even know what that hand or that grave was, but Saki's hand. It's gone, my left hand. I think it is still blooming. Like filling in the missing flower stand by that grave. If I go there again, I probably won't find it. At least I have not heard of any police investigation conducted after Saki's discovery that found such a thing. Did it disappear somewhere? Or maybe there was no such thing in the first place. But Saki's left hand was definitely gone. Or would I be able to find it? If I go there, will the grave and the cluster amaryllis reappear? Or rather, are they waiting for me to find them? Even if so, I don't want to go back again. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.